happens somehow. You can
It's not usual.
He had a long white beard, long white hair. He used to walk from the rising sun to the setting sun. And you can see the king's coat of arms with 3 fleur-de-lis and the king's crown, because that place was built by a nobleman, Etienne Leloup, in 1471, but in 1490 it became a royal dwelling place when Charles VIII bought it for his wife Anna of Brittany. So this is why we added that coat of arms. And you can see a necklace with gilded knots and shells, and a medallion with Saint Michael killing the dragon. This is a knight order which was put in place by Charles VIII's father, Louis XI, in Amboise Castle. 32 knights were chosen by the king, selected by the king. They could wear that necklace, they received that necklace. It was an honor to battle with the king. And if it was created in Amboise Castle, west side of Paris after Normandy, was independent. And the Duke of Brittany was battling against the French king Louis XI to keep independence. Unfortunately, he lost the battle, and he had to offer his only one daughter, Anna of Brittany, to the future king of France, Louis XI's son, Charles VIII. They got married in Loire Valley. Anna, she was 14, Charles was 21 when they got married. And they lived in Amboise Castle because Charles VIII was born in Amboise Castle. In the wedding contract, it was written, if the king would die before the queen without a boy, without an heir, she will have to get married with the king's successor to keep Brittany French. Unfortunately, they had 4 children, all of them died. And he put a fabric inside the window.
La peinture comprend 2 parties principales. La première est la ligne qui définit les formes et leur détail. C'est ce que l'on appelle le dessin. La seconde est la couleur, enfermée dans les formes du premier.
So Tours is our local regional centre, and all along the Loire on either sides of Tours is the Touraine region, and that's very big, and I think there's 14 different grape varieties that are accepted onto that appellation. So this is not Touraine Amboise or Vouvray, it's Touraine, and it's made in those egg-shaped barrels, by the way. Went in my water. But just start digging in and I'm going to bring things out. He's coming as well, leave a space there for the cheese.
It's a nice picnic.
The name of the wine is after it's a painting, one of my favorite paintings by Berthe Morisot. So Berthe Morisot was the wife of Manet, and she was a far better painter than Manet, in my opinion.
Wow.
Except that nobody talks about her because she was a woman. And she was actually, her paintings, so she exhibited in the first Impressionist exhibitions, and her paintings were bought before anybody else's by the French government. So they have loads of them in the French collections. But then, you know, she was a woman, so she was kind of just ignored. And she painted this painting, which is called La Chasse aux Papillons, the Butterfly Hunt, and it is her own sister and her niece. And they are in this gorgeous, she's got a lovely way with, you know how Impressionists, it's all kind of wishy-washy, it's gorgeous. So her sister is carrying a butterfly net and her niece is carrying a butterfly net. And my feminist art historian tutor at University College London told us that it was her comment on her place in society. So she came from like a sort of wealthy bourgeois family, and she was supposed to just get married and have babies, and that was it. And so she was making the point that a woman is like, in that society, was like a butterfly, something of beauty to be caught by a man and then put on display and in glass, like in a display cabinet, and then they couldn't do anything. So I loved that painting so much, not only because it's a beautiful painting, but also because I loved what it was saying. So then when we did this, I had this idea to do the sort of floral, and then once we'd done that, I was like, well, we should call it La Chasse aux Papillons.
Yes, absolutely.
Look at this color. Your soil type, to the elevation of your plot, whether you're at altitude or not, or what altitude, whether you are on a slope, how hard that incline is, whether it's north, south, east, west facing, whether you are in a continental climate or whether you're in a maritime climate, or like we are right here where those two climates meet. All of that is going to have a huge impact on what plants will grow in that specific place. So your terroir is responsible basically for selecting the plants, but also your vintage year, because whatever happens between September and September of any given year is going to have a huge impact. If you have a really rainy winter like we just had, that's a lot of rain, so the plants that do well in water are going to do well. If you have drought, that's going to change things. If you have hard frost, if you have boiling hot sun, all of that is going to choose exactly what grows there. So no place and no time are going to be exactly the same. So you're going to have a unique blend of plants growing around your vine plants, because you've chosen the vine plants, but you haven't chosen the rest. Nature has. Once you have those plants, obviously they are going to attract certain bugs and not other bugs. Then those bugs and those plants are going to attract certain small mammals, and then those small mammals and those bugs and those plants are going to attract birds, and then birds of prey, and then other animals that are going to come and eat off all of that. So exactly what is living in that place is completely dependent on the place and time. Once you have all of that installed, you are going to have everything in that environment living. So they are going to be eating and pooping and making babies and doing all that good stuff. And then there will be a microbacterial level of life, which is also completely linked to all of that. So selected by your vintage year and your terroir. And it's in that microbacterial level of life in any living environment that you're going to find natural, or what we call indigenous yeasts. And there's going to be any number of different yeasts, and they are going to be basically chosen by your vintage year and your terroir. And then when you pick your grapes, on their skins is going to be all of this life that you're going to bring back into the cave with you. Put it, each different plot of land, each different grape variety is going to go into different tanks, and it's those yeasts that are going to eat away at the sugar and turn that grape juice into wine. So that is what is giving you, when people say, oh, I can smell, rose and blueberry and whatever it is, it's the chemical reaction of that particular yeast eating the sugar that is making that smell. So it's literally the same molecule that is in blueberries or is in whatever. So we haven't added blueberries or blah, but we have that flavor has been produced by the yeasts that have eaten away at sugar. So that is why making wine organically is so important to us. It's also because of ecology, because we also care about the environment, but I would say even more important that it's really about the flavor and the possibilities of the wines that we can make. Once you get into the cave, which is this kind of, there's obvious reasons why people started making wine in caves. it's about 15 degrees centigrade all year round, and that never changes. So you need that to make wine. If you were in a modern building, you'd have to put in heating, you'd have to put in air conditioning, you'd have to put in humidity control to keep the wood in good condition. That's all done for you. But then there's also this kind of like slightly magical, mystical aspect to a cave, and that really can be explained. So every tank is going to be full of these different grapes from these different parts of the vineyard. As they ferment, part of any fermentation is evaporation. So there's a small percentage of every tank that is going to go out into the environment through the valve at the top. That is very poetically called the angel's share. They also say that in whiskey. So that is going into the environment, being taken in by the porosity of the rock, because we're in a limestone cliff, and limestone is it's basically chalk, very porous. So, and you can even see like the stains of all the tannins. And that, whatever is living in your tank, remnants of it are living in the environment around you. And I'm an artist, so I see everything slightly as like images. I kind of imagine the cave as being like a library of every single vintage that has ever been made in here for 500, 600, 700 years. There is something living on from everything that has ever lived in this environment. And that is quite important to us in the winemaking process, because as we're not using these like selected yeasts that are, bought from a winemaking shop and they do the job perfectly, we are relying on these yeasts which are natural, and sometimes they have sometimes Fred always says that they're a bit lazy, so I can imagine them like lying on a recliner with a pina colada at the side of the town. But, for whatever reason, sometimes the yeasts aren't doing exactly the job that they're supposed to be doing. And so every time we lift up a tank, the lid to stir or pump or whatever the things that we're doing to the wines are, there is going to be an exchange between what's happening inside the tank and what's happening around us. And so there's always going to be other ambient yeasts that are going to come in and do the job for us if the yeasts that were in our particular plot are not doing the job properly. So that's quite important. That's actually going to, Fred would say that we make wines that represent and taste like their terroir, their vintage, but also the cave in which they were made. So it's actually like part of the winemaking process for him. But then there's also another quite important thing, which is because the space around us is so jam-packed full of healthy yeasts and healthy bacteria from a healthy living environment, there is no space for the infiltration of bad bacteria. So we don't have to worry about other nasties coming in and taking up the space and eating away at our sugar, turning our wine into something that doesn't taste good, because the space is already full. So, in the same way that like when you go into hospital, that's where you get the worst kind of like streptococcus and E. coli and all these terrible things, because they've bleached everything, they've cleaned everything so much. And so that is an empty space. That's why when you take antibiotics and you killed off all the bacteria in your gut, that's when you're going to get a tummy bug, because the space is there and then the bad bacteria is going to be attracted to it. So our space is full, which means that we don't worry so much. I mean, we still worry. We're not going to like do anything really dirty in here. But you know what I mean? Like basically the space is full.